I was born in Britain, South Dakota on December 3rd, 1940, and I was a twin. And my parents were Clifford and Alice Larson. They were both born and raised up by Fallness Church east of Langford, South Dakota. So I had a twin brother, and the day I was born, his name is Dennis Larson, and my dad was so excited when he came home and the hired man was milking the cows, and he says, "Howard," he says, "Alice had twins, and there was two of them." And so that's been a joke our whole life about how excited our dad was. And he was a quiet man. My mother was the oldest in her family, and so she was kind of the matriarch, and she made a lot of the decisions of how we were growing up and born, how we were raised. But my dad was a kind of a quiet man. And then I had an older brother, Clark, who has passed away now. But he was a year and a half older. And then I had a younger brother, Roger, who lives in Rochester, Minnesota, and he was born in 48. And I have a sister Joyce, who lives in Spokane, Washington, and she was born in 51. My parents were both born and raised up within a few miles of Fallness Church, which is from Langford. It's 3 south and 4 or 5 east, up on a hill. And there's a Fallness Church in Norway, and that's what it was named after. And I got to see that in 2014, so that was a wonderful thing. My parents were born my dad was born in 1910, and my mother was born in 1917, and they got married on June 30th, 1937. And like I say, my older brother was born in 39, and we were born in 40. And my parents farmed on a little farm right east of Fallness Church until we were almost 2 years old, and then we moved about 5 miles west and to the Wicker Farm, they called it, and my dad rented that farm, and we lived there from 1942 to 1956. And then my parents bought what they call a Bolin farm up south and east of Fallness Church, and closer to Roslyn, and 1956, and they lived there till they retired and moved to Pierpont in 80s, I guess, late 70s, early 80s, and my dad still helped on the farm and stuff, and he passed away on December 1st, 1990, and my mother passed away on May 9th or 10th, May 10th, 9th, on 2001. So that's kind of the story of my immediate family. My mom was Johnson, and my grandpa's name was Olaf, and my middle name was Owen, so I was kind of named after him. And he came from Boston, Minnesota, down to help my grandfather Larson thrash and stuff, and so that's how he kind of got hooked up with. My grandmother was a Woggy, and they lived a mile west of the Fallness Church, and so that's how they got together. And my mother she was the oldest, and then she had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And my dad grew up about a mile and a half north of the Fallness Church, and he had an older brother, Harold, and then a younger brother, Raymond, and a sister, Lucille. And of course, they're all passed now. But my great-grandparents on both sides, my dad's mother was an Erickson, and Tom and Martha Erickson homesteaded in about a mile east of Fallness Church, and Hans and Helga Larson homesteaded a mile north of Fallness Church, and the Larsons came from the island of Cormoy in Norway and settled in Norway, Iowa in 1872. They came to America. And then the Ericksons came 1876, I think. And then they were to Norway, Iowa too. And then they all came up here in a Wicker family. And they walked, in 1880, they walked from Watertown, which is about 90 miles, and staked out their claims. And then they went back to Norway, Iowa, and then 3 years later they brought their families and what equipment they had and stuff on the train came to Webster at that time. And of course they had to travel from Webster, which was about 30 miles, to Fallness Church, and that's where they settled. And lived there the rest of their lives, I guess. And the Erickson family was a unique family. There were 6 boys and 6 girls, and my grandmother was one of the girls, and her name was Alina, and she married my grandfather Knut Larson in December 24th or 5th of 1907, and then they started their family, and like Harold and my dad and Raymond and Lucille, and they but the Erickson family, from my grandmother's family, there were 6 girls and 6 boys, and their dad got killed when he was 45 years old, and so their mother basically had to raise most of those kids. And I think it was in 1900 when he got killed, and so some of the kids were probably getting 15 years old or so, but the older boys, but she basically raised all those kids by herself. And the 6 boys' average age when they died was 96, and the 6 girls was 92. So they were, and great grandma Erickson died in 1959, and she was 97 years old, and she broke her hip, and when we were young, she would come to our house and tell us stories about when they first homesteaded. So I was pretty lucky to have a original homesteader from that we could talk to when we were young. Not too many people get to do that. So she was a wonderful lady, but she was kind of stringent too. My Uncle Harold married a girl from Beersford, South Dakota. We had first cousins. My dad had first cousins at Beersford. One of his dad's sister married a Sorensen from Beersford, so there was a connection. My dad and my uncle would go down there in the fall in Beersford and pick corn. And so my Uncle Harold met this girl from Fairmont, Minnesota, and she was a German, good-looking little German. And then the second year, when he met her the year before, and then he went back the next fall, and so they were getting along pretty good. And one of his cousins had a old Whippet car. This would have been 1929, Christmas Eve. So they were coming to Langford or to Fallness Church for Christmas Eve service, and they got as far as Watertown, and the bearings went out of the Whippet. So my dad's cousin, Richard Sorensen, told Harold and Ethel, he said, it's going to take me a couple hours to put new bearings in this car. He said, why don't you go get married, he said. So they did. And anyway, so they get to Fallness Church, and evidently the service was just about to start or something, and so my Uncle Harold's going to introduce his new wife to Great-Grandma Erickson. And the women sat on one side and the men on the other in the Norwegian church. So anyway, and of course they spoke Norwegian, and the service probably was in Norwegian at that time. And so my Uncle Harold introduced Ethel to Grandma Erickson, and she says on Norwegian to Harold, she said, is she Norwegian? And Harold answered her back, no, she's German, but he answered her back in Norwegian. So Ethel didn't understand what they were talking about. So that night before they went to bed up in my grandpa's house, she said, what did your grandma say about me? And she never forgot that his grandma, she didn't think much of them Germans, maybe. And so she died when she was 90, and they'd been moved different places, but they lived in Pierpont and were in that Fallness Church, and both buried there, of course, but the later years in their life, they were back there. And she said, yeah, these people up here never did accept me, which was not true, but she felt that way, And another story about Great-Grandma Erickson was that this youngest daughter, Olga, that wasn't born yet, or just maybe she was born when her dad died, but she was just a few months old. But anyway, my grandfather, Knut Larson, and his brother Louis had a thrashing crew, and so that's how my Grandpa Johnson on my mother's side came down and helped harvest. And there was two people from New Hampshire that came down, and they were French Canadians, and of course they were Catholic. And they came and they worked several summers, and they'd work here in the summer, and then they'd go up to Canada and up by the Lake of the Woods and homestead, and then they'd go up there in the winter and prove up their claims. And anyway, by 1921, then I think they started coming here in 1916. By 1921, Uncle Bill, the French Canadian, and Olga Erickson, the youngest girl, were going to get married. And Grandma didn't think much of that Canadian, French Canadian, and so she wouldn't go to the wedding. And I think the wedding was at Fallness, but my great uncle Lewis, who he'd worked for, he gave him a good team of horses and a wagon, and so I don't know how far they had to go, but then they got it put on a train and took it up to Canada, and they lived up there, but in the later years, then great grandma would go up and visit them, so she kind of mellowed in the in the later years, but and this Uncle Bill, St. John, his name was, and he wrote a book. Well, he'd had it all written down about his life, and after he died, his sons published this book, and it's a hardcover book that's pretty interesting. He tells about one story when he was thrashing with my grandfather and my great uncle, that this friend that he had with him, I can't remember his name, but they broke down one of the bundle wagons, and so he had it up in the yard, and they had a big barn, and dairy barn, and they had these ropes that pulled the hay up, and anyway, this French Canadian, he didn't want to get under that wagon, so he kind of took it loose from the running gear, and he put that rope around it and hooked his horses up to it, and it's going to lift the wagon or the box off of the running gear. And my Aunt Hilma came out, and she said, "You know for sure what you're doing there. You know, Lewis probably don't like what you're doing there, but you might break that rope." But he didn't pay any attention to her, and of course he tried to lift it, and he broke the rope. But I don't know, Hilma fired him, but Lewis hired him back. That was one of the stories in this Uncle Bill's book. And then my grandfather's sister, Helen Larson, she married Tom Sandby, and she lived to be 98 years old, and she wrote a book when she was in the old people's home, and told about the blizzard of 1888, when several of the neighbors died up there in that community because it came up so fast, and was a severe blizzard, and she was a wonderful lady, and now her daughter, who is Hazel Swenson from Bath, well, she lives in Aberdeen now, but she wrote a book just recently, and it's called
Seven Hills of Home.
Seven Hills of Home, and it's about a farm that's halfway to Eden, South Dakota, up here. That's right along the road, and so we have some talent in our family, and I'm interested in history and stuff, so it's been kind of a blessing to be born into such a creative and family and people who've lived long lives. And I had one great uncle who homesteaded at Wall, South Dakota, in 1910, I think, and got to be quite a successful rancher out there. And then another great uncle went to not Haver, by in Montana, up by Helena, and homesteaded, and some are railroad people, and so it's interesting family when they'd all get together in later years when great grandma was getting old, and they'd have these birthday parties in 1956. She was 94 or 5 years old, and so they had a big birthday party at Wiley Park, and I was there. It was 110 degrees on the 6th of July or whenever it was. But that's the first time in 50 years that all of her family had been together. And so that was, quite a deal. In that family, there was, I forget one time we had a party and there was, all the grandkids and the great grandkids and all that stuff. There was hundreds of years of, age, and there'd only been one out of, probably over 100 siblings and grandkids and cousins, that there'd only been one death in that whole deal, and that was Uncle Carl's son got killed on a motorcycle in 1938 or 9. He was out in Washington State, but he was the only sibling or cousin that had died out of that whole family since 1900. And so that was quite an accomplishment for that Erickson family.
Dale and I just kind of grew up together, I guess. They were farm boys and lived on the farm, and I lived in town, and they'd come to town Wednesday and Saturday night, I think it was, and we'd walk around town holding hands. And then we got a block off holding hands, walking around blocks. Just went to high school together. We were married September 11th, 1960. It'll be 50. Oh, yeah, 7 years.
57.
Yeah. And it's 9/11/60 we were married. And it'll be 57 years this year, September. We have 3 children. Peggy, Paula and Darren, and Todd and Dina. Grandsons are Tyler, Tate, and Trey, and Sean, and Ryan, and Lewis. 6 boys. Got a basketball team there, but I don't think any of them played.
I was in the Army, and I went to the Army in November 4th, 1959. And anyway, we planned on getting married in at Christmas time in 1960. But I was lonely and she was lonely, and so we decided to get married in September. But before that, I guess, in the 59 then, I was through boot camp at Christmas time of 59, and I came home and we were going out to our friend's house east of Langford.
By a little schoolhouse.
By a little schoolhouse there right off the highway up there by Hickman Dam, and I stopped the car and proposed to her right there and gave her the ring. And then we got married. That was in Christmas of 59, and then we got married on 9/11 in 1960. And I got to leave to come home. Well, when we were in Norway in 14, then Bonnie's rings were 50-some years old, and she said, I don't want any fancy rings. She just wanted a plain ring. And so Peggy and I found this ring in Bergen, Norway, and then later on, that when we were in Norway, I found this one that kind of matched it, and so that's our new ring. I hadn't wore a wedding ring for quite a few years because in 1981 I caught my ring on a truck box and just about tore my finger off, so I hadn't wore a ring till we went to Norway, and I got this one. Now Peggy has my old ring. They had to cut it off me, so it's smaller now.
Our children, well, Peggy, born in June 23rd, 1962, and Paula was born on June 9th, 1967, and Todd was born November of 68, November 6th. One time Peggy was going to run away. She was pretty little. So I helped her pack, and she got outside, and she was going to go over to Joe's right up the road. And as you know, it gets kind of cold. What are you going to do? Do you have a blanket for tonight? And I just asked her a lot of questions. It gets dark out and stuff, so I went back in the house. She never got any further than the step.
She was going to run away because Paula was born, and she was 5 years old, and she was a little jealous.
When Paula was born, Grandma Alice, Dale's mom, had taken care of her. And she'd come in the house, walk straight back to her bedroom, which was going to be both their bedrooms, and said, she took all my drawers and my bed. She walked back out and says, Grandma, let's go home. So then Grandma sat and visited and stuff, and after a while, then she stayed with us. And Paula was Miss Langford and got to go to Aberdeen. That was part of her life. And Todd went to Watertown Votech. He was on the farm where we raised the kids. Yeah. Had a good life out there, I guess. The grandsons are all busy with their jobs, and we'll have a wedding September 8, 2018. Sean and Kayla are getting married. I remember one thing, Paula and Peggy would get Todd, I don't know, to play house or whatever it was, and he just, well, my name, call me Bob. I'm Bob. I don't know if he remembers that yet today or not, but Peggy, they belonged to 4-H, did very well with their cattle in 4-H and crafts. And they belonged to Farmers Union, and we belonged to Fullness Church, Sunday school, and Christmas programs, and everything there, and a lot of activities in school. We got a cabin at Roy Lake, Little Langford Side, they called it.
That was your dad?
It was my mom and dad's, and they were failing in their health, so we bought it with a little help from the kids, I think, at that time, just to get a down payment on it. And we bought it in, what year?
86.
in 1986, and we sold it in 2001. All three of our children went to Langford School, graduated, and went on to college, all of them. And have been very successful. And Peggy moved out to Spokane and was a counselor out there and stuff until she got sick and come back home again, and just about lost her. And otherwise, Paul and Darren have settled here in Langford. Darren runs the station up in Langford. And Todd is on the farm and works for Pro Egg in Aberdeen. And Peggy now is with Bethesda Homes of Aberdeen. Dale's a retired farmer, and I never retired because I'm doing the same thing I've done all my life. So, we've had a good life, fun life. We had a lake cabin that was owned by my mom and dad up at the lake for 15 years. Had lots of good times, entertained people, had cousins, picnics, and it was fun. But it got to be so much. I was taking care of Harriet Lickness, a 90-year-old woman, and Todd wasn't married then, so I took care of kind of his house and clothes and stuff. And we built a duplex in '88, and I was helping Grandma Alice, Dale's mom, cared for her with cancer. She lived with us. I had about 5 jobs all at the same time. I told the kids and Dale something has to go, and it's got to be the lake cabin. So we sold that. It was funny because I knew how much I wanted for it. It was $50,000. They all laughed at me. You're never going to get that. And I says, well, be 10 for Dale, 10 for me, 10 for Peggy, 10 for Paula, and 10 for Todd. 50,000. And I'm not going to sell it unless I get that much. And Dale says, you're never going to get that much. Never. The kid called me up from Veblen, was he? And he'd been to look at it in the fall of the year when we weren't up there. And I told him, we met him up at the cabin. And I told him what I wanted. I wasn't going to go down from that price. And he says, well, I want it. And so I got 50,000, but next year or two, I probably could have gotten 50,000, all the lake prices. But he has built a home on that lot because I guess the cabin itself was starting to mold from underneath. So he tore that down, and the cabin or the house or the mansion or whatever's up there now is just beautiful. And we're way down from the water at our cabin, and he's landscaped that all the way down to the water. Fabulous. But he's enjoying it, and we don't miss it, I guess, and Peggy does maybe. But she can go rent on. Bonnie Marie Holland Larson. I was born January 10th, 1941, at home on a farm up in the hills. That'll be, northeast of Langford. I lived on the farm with Mom and Dad and an older sister till I was 6 years old. And then I had my siblings, my mom and dad are Elmer Nestor, Holland, Flaglet Holland. My maiden name was Flagtvet. Their parents were from Norway, and I don't know the years that they come over here or anything. My siblings are Sharon, myself, a brother Dennis, Marlis, and Linda. My mom and dad passed away 9 months apart in 1990 and 1991. My mom was born to Muntz and Lena Flagtvet. They lived in the Langford area, probably west of Langford. And Dad was born to Mandius and Clara Holland. And Clara's maiden name was Hoynes.
She was born here.
Yeah, Grandma Clara was born here, but Mandius come from Norway on a ship. A lot of cousins, aunts and uncles. When we moved from the country to the town into Langford, our family, I was 7 years old when I started first grade. We had no kindergarten. I went to the Langford Public School here in town and graduated 12th grade.
In 59.
Played half-court girls basketball. I was a cheerleader for several years and drummer in the band. Busy, fun time. Well, we figure now that they raised a real good family, us 5 kids. They were happy people. They liked to travel. Dad was a Standard Oil dealer and bulk truck here in Langford. Mom was home taking care of his 5 kids. Busy time. We were blessed because of so many other things that went on in other people's lives of the family. You know, had a good life. We tell about the times when we would walk to school. We had about a block and a half to school. And we had saddle shoes. And Dad didn't make a whole lot of money, so every month one of us got a new pair of shoes or new whatever we needed to go to school. Sometime our soles of our shoes would get loose and unsewn. And we'd walk to school like this, you know. And I tell Dale that and the kids that today, and they just laugh. And they said, well, why didn't you tie a rubber band around it and hold it together? You know, we weren't a poor family, but we weren't any different than anybody else. And we just had a good life. Well, when we got married on September 11th, 1960, Grandma Alice helped, Dale's mom, helped us a lot. My mom and Dad helped what they could do. Grandma Alice made me a dress, a going away dress, we called it. I borrowed Dale's aunt's wedding dress to get married. I had babysat for a family in town that owned a grocery store, Harlan Lois Erickson, and I babysat for them, so I had saved $350. And I thought that was a real lot of money. And so we were married in the Lutheran church. Langford. And we went on a honeymoon to Watertown, South Dakota, and come home and got ready and went back to the service in Manhattan, Kansas. When we got there that night, that was a nufta. It was in the basement of this house, nice yard. Everything. The bed, the mattress was horrible. Good thing I had a mattress pad and cover. Dale can probably tell you more on what I crabbed about. We had a little tiny coffee pot and a gas stove, and I'd never used a gas stove down in that little apartment. Every morning that army coffee would stink. I said, well, come to find out, the flames are burning the black handle on the coffee pot. And we were I was in the service of Dale for 9 months. And then we went to Sparta, Wisconsin for TDY. I was there with Dale. Then I come home here, and then Dale went back, and he got an early out to go home and help his mom or his dad on the farm. What else do you remember?
I got out of the Army. I served 21 months, and I got out on August 4th, 1961. And over the years, I've realized that was President Obama's birthday. You know, and there's contention about where he was born and when he was born. And so I'm kind of proud of that I got out of the Army, because that was one of the happiest days of my life when I got out of the Army. And getting a little off track here, but in summer of 2008, when he's running for president, I actually met President Obama in Watertown, and I was telling him a little story about Tom Daschle and how I'd helped him get elected, and he put his head up to me right next to my face and whispered in my ear. He said, "What's your name?" he said. And so I was pretty close to President Obama, and I was proud of that. But in my service time, I went in on November 4th and 59, and there was 5 of us from Langford that went. My neighbor Oral Hoynes, and who's passed away now, and Charles Lickness, and David Erickson, who was a cousin of mine, and Leslie Malm from west of town, and we all went the same day. And Leslie and Charles and Oral have all passed. But I took basic training in Fort Carson, Colorado, and then I got put in a medical detachment in Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, and was trained to be a medic. And then, of course, there was no wars or anything going on at that time, and it was in between Korea and Vietnam, so I wanted to get as close to home as I could so I could go home on weekends and stuff. And so I put in for Fort Riley, Kansas, and I got it. And so they put me on a bus in March of 60, first part of March of 1960, to Fort Riley, Kansas. And we got on in San Antonio, and we get to Dallas. And to kind of back up a little bit, President Truman had integrated the services in 1948. So, I had never been around black or Hispanic people, but by the time 1959 was 10 years, 11 years later, that, it was common practice, and nobody in the service part, I never felt that anybody thought anything about bunking or showering with people of different colors or races, and it was, I never even thought about it. And but anyway, so I'd been in the service then, what, 5 months or something, and anyway, I get off the bus and I had to go to the bathroom, so I'm kind of rushing, and I see restroom, and I head for it, and then I get to this place, and there's whole about 5 or 6 people sitting on either side that were black people, and I didn't really think too much of that because it's a bus depot, and anyway, I get down this little lane with people sitting on either side, and all of a sudden I see this huge sign. It says "colored only," and I've never seen that because we didn't have anything like that in the service, and there was probably 6 people on either side. And I watched them, and they all hung their heads. And I spun around, did an about face, and walked out the middle of the bus depot. And I wanted to scream. What in the hell am I doing defending a country that for 100 years after the Civil War, we're still treating people like animals? That was my thought, and I never forgot it. And those poor men that were sitting there, they were embarrassed for me, and I was embarrassed for them. And I don't ever want to feel that way again. And that's why I've instilled in my family that, like Martin Luther said, it's not the color of your skin, it's the character of your heart. And I've tried to live up to that in my life. But one thing that taught me that we can be better than that. And but we saw it with Obama. There's a lot of people that didn't like him because of the color of his skin, and it's sad. But I've got some friends that are African American, and my brother and I, and the rest of the people in Langford helped a young girl from Cameroon go to college, and now she's finishing her residency of being a neurosurgeon, and she's going to go back to Cameroon and be a doctor. But anyway, that was one of my bad experiences in the service. But I met, when I got to Fort Riley, Kansas, then I worked in the motor pool, and first guy I met was my Army buddy from Decatur, Illinois, Roger Eads, and I kind of worked for him, and then I met Ernie Blythe from Grundy Center, Iowa, and Darrell Rottvolt from Hillsboro, North Dakota, and Dennis Pop from New Prague, Minnesota, and Ernie Blythe had passed away in 2009, but in 1968, about 6 or 7 years after we all got out of service, 7 years I guess it would have been, we started having Army buddy reunions. And at that time we just all had young families, and we'd bring our families, and some of our kids weren't even born yet. But anyway, every 5 years we'd have these on Labor Day weekends. But Ernie and I had a special relationship, and Ernie Blythe from Iowa, he came to our farm first part of August of 1963 on his honeymoon.
Peggy was just born.
And anyway, so then the next year I'd go to Iowa, and then he'd come. For 49 years we saw each other every year. So that's kind of a special thing that I really loved about the service. I would have never met those people. And Roger Eads from Illinois, him and his son are big farmers, and so we talk, just about every month. And we've been going down there every 2 years, and for the big farm progress show that's in Decatur, Illinois. So those are the good things that happened to me when I was in service. And that's still going on. I've been a member of the American Legion for 52 years now. And so that was the good and the bad of the military service, I guess. Well, we've had our ups and downs. We've, we had a lot of good years and a lot of fun. And but in my early days, especially when we got back to or started farming in the fall of '61, and I was kind of obsessive, work had to get done, and sometimes it was tough for Bonnie to put up with some of that stuff. And then I had a little problem with the drinking, and so then as things went on in summer of 1981, she was about ready to take the family and leave, and I kind of knew it. And I'd quit drinking for 40 days at a time once in a while when I was on a diet or something, and didn't really have a problem not drinking until I took a drink. And then it got right back to where it was, and I knew that wasn't normal. And so anyway, on the weekend of the 28th of August of 1981, she went to the lake to her dad's cabin to stay, and I'd be going up there at night and working in the day, and I was drinking more than normal because we'd done harvesting. Anyway, all week we were drinking at night, and so on Saturday morning everybody kind of thought I was going to go home, but went and got a 6-pack of beer and went and took a shower at the East Park at Roy Lake. And instead of going home, I go to Lake City and start drinking screwdrivers. And they didn't have orange juice, so I had to drink grapefruit juice, which I didn't like in the first place, but I evidently thought I needed to drink, so I did. And about 2:30 that afternoon, Bonnie sent her sister Sharon up. Somebody had seen my car at Lake City and said, "You better get home." So I took another 6-pack of beer, and which I didn't really like beer anyway, but come back to the cabin. It was a hot day, and I was sitting at this picnic table with my beer, and nobody was paying any attention to me, and probably didn't want to. And Paula, who was 13 at the time, and one of her friends walked by. And this friend, I still don't know who it was, but says to Paula, who was ignoring me, of course, says, "What's wrong with that guy?" And I looked up, and I'm sure it was the sun. To me, it seemed like God. And I said, "What in the hell is wrong with you? You're supposed to be here for a family vacation, and you're drunk in the middle of the day." And so then we got home on Sunday night, and I promised her that night that I didn't want to ever drink again. But I didn't know how not to. But here's where God intervened. I went to Brookings that day. It broke a crankshaft on my couple-year-old tractor that I bought from my uncle, and the John Deere wouldn't warranty it because I was the second owner, even though the tractor was still under warranty. Would have been if he'd owned it. But anyway, I took that crankshaft to Brookings for a metallurgist to see if there was a flaw in it. And of course, she assumed that, I would come home drunk. But I didn't. I came home at supper time, and she was acting a little funny, and finally she said, "I got something to say." "What's that?" I said. "Well, your brother Dennis, twin brother, called, and we hadn't talked for quite a while because it'd been harvest and he farming at the time. So he called, and you were gone, and at noon, and asked how things were going."
And I told him.
And she told him that I wanted to quit drinking it. So he had a friend in Groton that had helped a lot of people sober up, and so he went to coffee with him and said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Well, does he know somebody that's in AA and that he respects?" "Yeah," he said, "this guy from Siston that owns the sale barn, he's done business with him, and he's been sober a few years, knows him pretty well." So my twin brother called this person, and Bonnie told me that night, she said, "Dennis is going to come and see you in the morning." And he did come, and I got in his pickup and he said, I hear you thinking about maybe quitting drinking. And I said, yeah, I want to. He looked me right in the eye and he said, Dale, he said, you're too damn good a man to let that shit get you. And of course we all are. But anyway, then it was state fair going on, so we couldn't go to the meeting that next Tuesday, but the next Tuesday, probably the second Tuesday in September 1981, Bonnie and I both went. She went to Al-Anon, and Dennis and his wife took us to the first meeting in Siston, and then I was also going, which I still do, to the Yellow House in Aberdeen. I got started going there on Monday nights when I could. And anyway, there was some people who put meetings on at the Zion Church in Aberdeen yet today, some of them, but some of the original ones aren't there now. But one of these guys that lives in Fargo now, he came from Fargo, but anyway, he used to say that he'd get up and speak, and he would say that, you know, this alcohol is a simple program. He said, you just don't drink today for 24 hours. He said, you get a sponsor, somebody that you have something in common with, and use the sponsor, and then you pick out a meeting that you're comfortable with and attend it on a regular basis, at least once a week. And then the only time you miss that meeting is if there's a death in the family, your own. So I took that literally because I didn't want to drink again. So for 7.5 years until I had my first knee surgery on the end of May of 1988, I never missed that meeting in Siston. Snowstorms, rainstorms, sometimes we'd have to go around by Summit to get home. And
Crazy.
never missed that Tuesday night meeting. And
But today he's helped many people way back till today he is.
so I'm still go to Aberdeen or Britain once a week, and Aberdeen try to go once a week. Last year I helped a local guy who was having a liver transplant that needed to go to a lot of meetings, and so we'd go to
Every night.
We went Monday night to. They suggested that he go to 4 meetings a week. Well, you know, they think, well, you live in Aberdeen, that isn't hard to do. Well, out here it's a little different. So Monday night we went to Webster. Tuesday night we went to Siston. And it was ironic that there's several guys that in Siston that were there 35 years ago that were still coming, you know, that I knew. And anyway, then Britain on Wednesday nights, and then we had a guy up by Roslyn that'd been sober 47 years who just passed away last year, but we'd go to his farm on Thursday nights and have a meeting, and then sometimes we'd go to Aberdeen besides. But anyway, this young man now has gotten his liver, and hopefully he'll have a productive life, you know. And but AA has really been a great part of my life, and it's still is today. And you know, it just makes me feel good that maybe I can help somebody, and but that, like it always says, we get more help from the people we help than than we help them. Basically, a big part of my life and saved our marriage and our family, and so that's been a great part of our. It's going to be 36 years now.
Well, when we first got out of service, after married, come home and lived on Guthrie Anderson's farm. It was an old homestead. It added on to house. Old ceiling boards. Peggy was the only one born in there. The water we didn't have water. We didn't have bathroom. The wind would blow and it'd come right through the ceiling boards on the kitchen walls. And if we spilt water, it would freeze instantly. Until Guthrie built us the house, and I was pregnant with Paula. And when we moved in there, so then we had the bathroom, automatic washer and dryer, the whole modern day thing. It was hard work on the farm. I remember that. It was manual. A lot of things are not automatic. That's for sure.
But as far as the farming part, I grew up in the hills, and then when I was in high school, I worked out north of town here for the Joneses from what they call the flats, and we have rocks and hills up in east, and they have gumbo out here, and when I was growing up, I always thought, well, these Swedes that live over here, they always seem to have a little more money than the Norwegians, and I never could figure out why, because they all worked hard. Most of the Norwegians had bigger families, so that was part of it, but when I rented Guthrie Anderson's farm out here, and he was a Swede, and that section of land was a very good piece of land, and then later on I was able to buy some land up by the Swedish church, and I realized pretty early on why the Swedes had more money than Norwegians, because they had better land. And so I was lucky there that I was able to end up owning some of that land, and so we had some tough times financially, but not like some people did, because we rented from Godford half and half basis, and so I got cattle established and machinery. He bought part of the machinery, and so I never had to borrow a lot of money to start. And by the time he died, then I was fairly well established, and then I started buying some land, and so that worked out pretty well, and so I never, and then when the 80s come along, when the high interest rates and the what they call the farm crisis came, I didn't owe a lot of money, and that was the time when I stopped drinking and was able to take advantage of some opportunities because I had a low debt. I could borrow money when some of my neighbors and stuff couldn't. and because, and then my brother and I made some purchases and stuff, my twin brother and I, and but there again, if I'd have been still drinking, none of those things would have happened then. And so then, basically, you know, a lot of people, some of them went broke in the 80s, but they were awfully good years for me. And so then, as far as, so I really enjoyed farming, and but then my knees started going bad, and we had a lot of cattle, and so I couldn't help with that much anymore. And Todd took over, and then he decided it was too much for him to do, so we sold our cattle, and well, first he quit farming in '95, I think, and then we sold our cattle in '98, and of course we'd moved to town here in the duplex in '88, and but you know, I really enjoyed the farming when we could do it, and we still have our land and rent it out, and I still sharecrop my land, and I got, you know, some in the CRP, and so it's been a really nice retirement for us. We have steady income, and of course, gets back to none of that would have been here if I hadn't stopped the drinking when I did, you know. So we've had a pretty good life.
We traveled some. Dale went with a cousin of his to Phoenix several times. I went with him a few times, but I'm kind of a homebody. And been there, done that. So my sisters and I have traveled some, you know, quite a few places and things. Well, I had pancreatitis, stones in my pancreas, doctored for several years because they couldn't find out what H. pylori I had, and stomach problems and the pancreas, and finally they went down to try to get the stones with a tube several times at the University of Minnesota, and couldn't get them, was still causing problems. So the last resort, he said, was surgery, which the pancreas doesn't like to be bothered. And but they had to, and couldn't get all the stones, but they still have stones there. Then a year later, I had a heart attack, and they had to bump me a couple times to bring me back. And I had both knees done, but that was there later. What life does, I guess. The first time I had knee surgery, it was wonderful. Second time, and everybody said I did such a good job in exercising, you know. And the second time, he thought, she's doing all right. So he didn't think he needed the help. But yes,
well, you didn't
he
need
was
as
a
much
good
help
nurse.
as you thought you did.
Well, through it all, yeah, it's been a good.
Well, just
Faith, family, and good friends. They always mean a lot.
you know,
Make it simple, you know, just
work hard, but do something that you enjoy doing, you know, and work hard at it, but then, you know, take some time to have fun too,
And I think the younger generation knows that better than we did.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, they know that, and that was one of the things that I didn't know until I stopped drinking, is that I was so obsessed with being successful that, you know, it was either work or drinking. You know, I deserved to drink because I'd worked all night, and those kind of things. But then once I made that commitment to that meeting and helping others, somehow, you know, things just got better, so much better. But I also got to give my uncle, who worked for me, and I'd rented his farm, and he was a 7 to 7 guy, and go home at noon and have lunch, and had never drank, and so he didn't understand, you know, the alcoholism part, and of course I never showed it around him, but in fact he told me, he said, you know, if I'd have known you were alcoholic, I probably wouldn't have rented my land to you. But anyway, when I made that commitment to go to that meeting, he said, if we're harvesting or whatever we're doing, and I'll stay till you get home. And he did, and that really, you know, and then Todd was getting old enough, and Peggy was around some, and enough to help, you know, and so I never felt that I was neglecting anything by going to the meeting, because he helped a lot. And I've said it many times that once I quit worrying about making money, it just came, you know. And so that way, you know, so many things changed in that instant and I, you know, owe it a lot to the AA program, the philosophy that teach you how to live, not just how not to drink, how to live one day at a time. Ask God for help every morning and every night, and thank Him that He's given you another day. And since I started living that way, it's been good, you know. And all the benefits came with it, you know. Well, you know, the prejudice thing was the experience I had in the service, but even, you know, my folks and stuff, they, you know, were always fairly liberal people and loving Christian people, and
you kind of just knew they loved you. They never said it.
No, my family was a little more that way, hugging and stuff than her family.
My family. But I just, in my heart, I just thought that's what I'm going to do. Say, I love you.
And we still do that. 12-year-old grandson, you know, he comes and he always got to hug you, you know, before he goes.
Like Todd's bear hugs all the time. He's like Todd's bear hugs.
And so that's what we've tried to instill in our family, is love and tolerance and
communicate. We've been very good at that. Probably better than we should be sometime, but probably communicate too much. But and not afraid, you know.
Well, know,
say it or how you feel, unless it really hurt somebody. But,
and then the other thing is that because of our relatively small successes and financial successes that we've had, that we're able to share with others and help people when they need it, and help the kids, and so that's been something that has been important to us, and hopefully we can not, live or give away a legacy, that not a financial legacy, but a spiritual and loving legacy besides, that they can carry on to their families, because I think that's what's life about, I take care of the lottery. There's about 20 of us in it. Larry Waddier, the superintendent in school, started it years ago, and then after he died, I took it over. Everybody says, well, if we won $400 million, what would we do? Well, we'd give it away. That's what I would do,
This lottery is with the coffee group downtown.
And
that do that.
And Larry Waddier, he always said, if I win, I'm going to pave the parking lot around the C-store. So he'd been dead, 5 or 6 years, but his name is still there, and I've still been putting his dollar in every week, or twice a week, and sometimes a couple of the other guys help a little bit. But they said, well, when are we going to take Larry Waddier's name out of there? I said, not as long as I'm running this thing. If you want to run it, then we'll keep Larry Waddier's name in there. But now one of his co-workers that he used to work with when he was up at System there at Road Dakota, she said, well, I'll take Larry's place now. So she's come in. But I said, if we win the big one, you got to do the parking lot. She agreed to that. So that's one of the things that I have now that I, enjoy every day, having coffee with
You do church
friends, and then I'm the treasurer of the 4 parishes, and so that keeps me pretty busy. Just about every day there's something going on, and between my AA stuff, and then my brother and I have a corporation on our farm and land that we have, and then we have a corporation here with this duplex, and so I keep as busy as I want to be doing books or whatever. So even in retirement, I have I don't know. Somebody said, "Well, what are you gonna do when you're not farming?" Well, you find things to do that, and I still have my farmland and market grain and stuff. And 2006, we built my office and big garage next door, and so I have an office out there so that I can spend time there. So it's been a wonderful ride. Yeah.
all in all. Yeah.
Hope it'll continue.
I have coffee guests every day, most neighbors, friends.
Your sister?
9:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock. So I say, hey, if you're around, come on in. I love to bake. It's a therapy, I think. I bake for the kids. give the boys when they're in college. I'd always send them a care package with them home.
You still do.
And yeah, all the grandkids still get, well, I give cards of money instead anymore because when I was not good health, I couldn't get out and buy things, so I would buy the Easter cards and put some money in them. Buy their own candy. Teenagers love money anyway. We are having coffee time with Cameron, Peggy, and Dale and I. And I was just telling them how coffee time got started in our neighborhood with Tate, Paula's middle boy, Tate Jensen, when he was little and home with his mom and stuff. He'd say, "Mom, it's coffee time at Grandma's."
Coffee time.
And so every day that he was home, when he went to school, he'd come home and he would come over here for coffee. So when school was going to start, I said, "Tate, we've got something to talk about." "What?" I said, "Well, you know, school doesn't get out till 3:30. And we always have coffee at 3. But you know what? We'll just make it a half hour later." Okay. So we have coffee time every day, 9:30 and 3 o'clock for anybody welcomed to come for coffee.